Trying to understand the eminence of real-world assets and the DeFi world? Then you are welcome to Link to the Chain, a podcast brought to you by BSOS. It is designed to help you understand the happenings of decentralized finance along with real-world assets. I am your host, Nikki from BSOS. I will be inviting experts from the Web3 industry to share with you their experiences and ideologies on RWAs and the DeFi world.
I'm pleased to be joined today by Romit Merchandani. He's the go-to-market and partnerships at Alchemy. Romit, why don't you kind of just give us a quick little intro, deep dive on who you are and what Alchemy does?
Yeah, absolutely, Nikki. So appreciate you all bringing us on. Just kind of give you a quick recap of how I landed here. So been working in tech for most of my career. I actually came from the marketing tech industry, which is completely different than Web3. But I worked there for about 9 years in my previous gig and joined Alchemy exactly a year ago. Actually, my 1 year anniversary was just on Tuesday and working on the go-to-market partnership side. So really our focus is multifold. We work with a lot of new developers that are exploring Alchemy as their first blockchain development platform. Also working with a lot of existing developers that are starting to scale up on our platform, and a bit of strategic alliances in our go-to-market function. Yeah, happy to always give more
Sounds
detail.
like a lot of fun. Can't lie, can't lie.
It
And
is.
it seems that Alchemy is a platform that assists developers developing on the blockchain. What inspired Alchemy to provide users with this type of tool?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So to take a step back to kind of like from a high level where Alchemy is focused today. So we're really focused on two main areas, Nikki. We want to provide really reliable and performant infrastructure for developers to build their applications at scale, and then also the tools to better understand what's going on at the application level. So, Web3 apps have certainly grown. They've kind of exploded in growth over the past few years. They've seen different things like traffic spikes. We want to make sure that we can certainly flex our architecture up and down based on the demand of their end users. To give you kind of a metaphor of like where we sit in the industry. So if you think of a flywheel and developers creating applications then attract users, and then the more users that come into the ecosystem, the more developers that ecosystem needs to create new apps, right? So Alchemy sits kind of squarely in between the developer and the application. We want to provide a really powerful toolkit for developers to make really great apps. Really great apps attract more users, and it kind of grows the ecosystem for everyone.
1000% agree. And would you say that kind of being the bridge for devs and for creating dApps, the focus seems to be on API functionality? Could you explain this term? And just for anyone who doesn't know what an API is, let us know what it is and how Alchemy is providing those services related to it.
Yeah, absolutely. API essentially is a way just to interact with an external system. So you basically can request information of that system, or you can send new information to be posted to that system. So an API can have a lot of different functions, but think of it as either reading information from like a server or database, or you're telling that database to store new information. So Alchemy sits at what's called the RPC layer. That's certainly like a blockchain term, but what that really means is we provide an API that connects to a node network. And I know there's kind of a lot of different terms in there. Within a blockchain, which is a distributed network of nodes, developers need to connect to those nodes, again, to read information off of the blockchain or to write new information to the blockchain. So to do that really simply, we offer an API rather than having developers run their own nodes. And that API functions as a developer's conduit to the blockchain. So there's kind of like a lot of different moving pieces, but to give you a little bit of history, before services like Alchemy and similar services, developers had to run their own nodes to be part of a blockchain network. Nodes themselves, they're what's called like virtual machines, and they're technical pieces of hardware. And kind of the more your app grows, the more nodes you need. So instead of having to manage all of that infrastructure in-house, we can abstract away a lot of that work for them and kind of expose all the functionality of a node architecture via an API. And all the developer needs to do in API is exposed via a single line of code. So it's very easy to access Alchemy. And then it's also very easy to then read and write data off the blockchain.
I feel like I just gained a college degree in API and layer whatever. Did you say layer two? Is that where the RPC
Yeah, the
lies?
RPC layer, it's a lot of different technical terms, but the RPC layer is the layer for how you connect via an API to a node. And
Mm-hmm.
then nodes basically can perform different functions when you connect to the blockchain. So it's not to get too technical, but basically what developers are trying to do is if you think of the blockchain as, an ever-growing database or ledger of information, depending on what kind of application you're building, whether you're building a wallet, an exchange, a marketplace, you want to figure out when users access those applications. Users want to see, okay, if I have a wallet, what do I own? If I go to a marketplace, what's available? If I go to an exchange, what are current token prices at? So that's all information that may live on the chain. So developers, for them to be able to surface and display that information in their app, they have to read it off the chain and read it in a really quickly in a really performant way. So that's what Alchemy does for them. We grab that data from the chain in a really performant and scalable way. We help them to display it on the app's front end. And then when the user decides to take an action, maybe they want to transfer a token within a wallet to someone else, maybe they want to buy something from an exchange, that's a new event or a new transaction. So we basically broadcast that event or transaction to the blockchain. Hopefully that gets picked up or what's called mined, and then that's forever part of the blockchain's history.
Got it. And it looks like you guys have collaborated with Polygon. How has this transformed Web3 and especially for the devs?
Yeah, absolutely. So love the Polygon team. Kind of the co-founders of Polygon, JD, Sandeep, and others. They're really close friends of Alchemy. If you take a step back and just see what Polygon's done, especially last year, it's quite incredible. Beyond working with a lot of the major Web3 dApps, they actually onboarded a lot of major like Fortune 500 companies. So Polygon was able to bring on the likes of like Starbucks, Reddit, Disney, Nike, all to build on the Polygon chain. So when you're a developer starting to build out in Web3, you typically choose your first chain. You certainly can go cross chain, but the fact that Polygon was able to convince all these, you know, classic Web2 houses to build in Web3 and build on their chain was really quite something. So, in terms of our partnership, we exposed an API for Polygon, and that's coming up on almost 2 years ago. It's been a very fruitful, very symbiotic relationship for both of us. We actually saw when Alchemy rolled out Polygon support that summer, within a year, the number of developers building on Polygon actually 16x'd, which is pretty crazy. So it's both that I think developers were both asking for more Polygon support and also asking Alchemy to build out their toolkit on the Polygon chain. So it's worked really well from that perspective. And then in terms of like where we're going with them, so we really see ourselves as really the only complete development platform for Polygon. How we think of, and there's a lot of different chains, so how we kind of think of like which chains we build on, we think of this as kind of like a three-tiered approach, right? So we kind of have like the build pillar, which is providing our infrastructure and our really reliable dev tools for developers to build on that chain. We think of our grow pillar, so doing things like Alchemy University for educating developers on how to build on Polygon. And we think of like our partner pillar. So like how do we go to market and bring more Web2 and Web3 brands onto that chain and kind of like grow the ecosystem for everyone.
It sounds like a match made in heaven, essentially.
Yeah, it has been. We partner with a lot of chains, so Polygon's not the only one, but
Hmm.
Polygon's been a close partner of ours, and they've really done a great job of growing their ecosystem.
Yeah, they're blowing up everywhere, like you said, already getting into the mainstream kind of companies like Nike, like Reddit. Like these are big names, and it's cool to see it, becoming more and more adopted. So that's always a good sign.
Yeah,
And
if you
moving on, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say like it's funny like for us being in Web3, like we may interact with NFTs every day, but
Hmm.
from like a Web2 perspective and bringing more of the masses into Web3. So Nike just did their dot swoosh release. I don't know if you've seen that, but like that's like basically claiming like your own domain name within Nike's metaverse. That was just available like 2 months ago, and they just kind of did their first airdrop. I think it was yesterday. So like that was super exciting. That's all on Polygon. And then like
Wow.
Starbucks Odyssey as well. They wanted to bring kind of like a loyalty rewards aspect that is blockchain native. Actually, just similarly, I also just bought my first Starbucks NFT It's hosted on the Nifty Gateway Marketplace, but just bought my first one this week too. So it's really cool. You can like use your credit card to buy, so you don't have to like have or USDC or ETH to transact there. But I think it's a really cool
Hmm.
process that's going to bring like more of the mainstream into Web3.
Yeah, mass adoption for sure.
Yep.
What was the floor price on the Odyssey?
Yeah, so they have kind of a number of collections. I paid $100 for it, which may seem like a lot, but if you look over on Nifty Gateway, I think the lowest offer was like 135, and like the average sales price was like 160 to 180. So it's by no means like trying to flip that asset, but as long
Hmm.
as you know there's like a liquid market and there's high demand, um,
Yeah.
that's going to kind of increase the over. And it was a limited collection, although there were 5,000 tokens. I think within 24 hours they sold out. So it still shows that even if those are Web3 native folks, like it's something that you can like, something my mom would understand, right? Like, hey, I'm on the Starbucks app, and I bought this NFT of something that I own. It's kind of like it's more like an educational piece versus like a degen trading NFT, right?
Yeah. What are the benefits of getting the Starbucks NFT? Just a side question out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's I'll probably dig into that a little bit more. I think it's like access to merch, access to events. It probably
Hmm.
has some kind of multiplier effect on your Starbucks rewards points. It's more so like being part of the project and like being early. That's like really exciting for us. I think what's really cool about Alchemy is the team really encourages all of the team members to interact with different like Web3 projects. We actually get a small stipend to interact with like DeFi protocols, with NFT marketplaces, because once you go through it, then you can like identify, because we're a development platform, you can identify like
Hmm.
the gaps in the user process, or if there's anything that's like failing at the infrastructure level. Like that's how we better understand our partners and customers. So we do actually have a small stipend to like go and interact with these projects. But yeah, it's cool to be early and say that if it is something that does reach mainstream adoption, that you were one of the first ones to interact with that collection.
Yeah, that's really dope that Alchemy provides that for its employees. That's super, super cool. I like it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
Dope. Thanks for going a little deep with the Starbucks NFT, but
Yeah, happy to.
back on track.
Sure.
um, Alchemy does have a lot going on with the different vast range of services that you guys offer, including different solutions and providing enhancement essentially for devs in Web3. Um, could you briefly tell us about the different line of products and services that you all offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So, bit of a longer answer, but I'll kind of like boil down to like what our key product focuses are. So, first and foremost, we want to provide access to the various blockchains that we support. So, via an API, developers don't have to run their own nodes in house. They can connect to what we call our supernode architecture. So, why we call it supernode? It's not just us taking nodes off of a developer's plate. We actually built our own architecture for better reading and writing data off of the chain. So there's a lot of different things that a node does. You can call different methods. Again, you can broadcast new events, but nodes themselves aren't very performant pieces of hardware, especially at scale. So we wanted to abstract away a lot of those functionalities of a node. We actually built kind of like our own node, built it from the ground up, all in-house, but it's basically a distributed system that better handles all the responsibilities of a node, again, connected via a single line of code, but it's a much more performant, elastic way of streaming data to and from a blockchain. So at our core level, that's where we're doing data streaming from the chain for developers. We have a number of front end tools as well, though, because once you actually have infrastructure sorted, then you want to better understand, okay, what's going on at the app level? Are contracts failing? Are transactions stalling? You want to be able to find any kind of patterns in systemic errors, or dig into like analytics around where users are located. So there's a lot of like app level analytics debugging tools available in our front end. That is all kind of like our base layer that most of our developers use us for. Where Alchemy starts to kind of pull away from the pack is when we go a little bit more up the stack and we move to what we call our enhanced APIs. So what we wanted to do in this set of APIs is we wanted to basically simplify and optimize for what we saw like were common request patterns. Because typically, like going back to the example of like if you're building in a wallet or an exchange or a marketplace, we saw developers, pulling up things like, a user accesses a wallet, they want to see what they own, right? Or when they pull up a wallet, they want to see, who do they transact with. To easily fetch that data from the chain is actually a pretty tricky problem. If you have to scan the entire chain every time I load up my wallet, that kind of query can take hours to run. So we kind of built a number of enhanced APIs that have basically like fetched, indexed, organized all this data for developers. So you can still return like pretty vast sets of data in milliseconds. And really this is supposed to be mimicking like the Web2 experience, right? We always say like, Gen Z grew up with iPhones. When you load up Venmo, what do you see? You see your wallet balance, you see your recent transactions. That all loads, in a sub-second time frame. We need to bring that same kind of experience to Web3, and that is what a lot of our enhanced APIs solve for. So that's kind of at the API level. I think, again, because Alchemy's been in market for a number of years, we have really solved for data accessibility, right? Reading and writing data off the chain. So where we're really focused this year is on data customizability. So a lot of developers, they're basically focused on data streaming. And all that really means is they want to either fetch historical data off the chain or they want to listen to events at head. But they really need like speed, they need reliability, they need flexible schemas. So again, this is getting a little bit technical, but if you think of like your typical like ETL model, we provide like really performant extractions from the blockchain, but now developers need really flexible transformations of that data. So we're allowing developers to apply their own schemas so they can get data in the format that they want at the time that they want, and then they can load that into like a Postgres or a data store and query that at their leisure. So that's like on like the data customizability aspect, giving developers data in the format that they need when they need it most. That's kind of like one layer. And let me know if this is getting too convoluted. Another layer that we're also focused on is our transaction path. So like what that means is like as blockchains grow, right, some networks are becoming more congested, but there's certainly a focus on things like transaction speed and bringing more users into the fold. So we want to fundamentally protect transactions and give users peace of mind that the transactions that they're making are actually going through and are doing what they intended them to do, right? So we kind of released a number of products in this area to reinforce transactions. That basically helps push transactions through by broadcasting it to multiple availability zones. We've released things like simulated transactions, which basically like show users, you are sending 1 ETH to this address. Is that what you meant to do? If so, press submit. Again, these are kind of like classic Web2 mental models that we're helping to bring to Web3. And then like on the bleeding edge of blockchain and Web3 is the new EIP, which is primarily around account abstraction. There's like really interesting things that a lot of fintechs are doing in that space. So that's definitely an area that we're exploring in terms of things like paymaster services, bundler services. But yeah, to boil it down, kind of like a few different areas we're focused on. Happy to provide more detail if any of those sound interesting.
Man, take a breath, Roman.
Yeah. Sorry, I know that was
No,
very
no, no.
long-winded.
No, it was great. I personally love like a lot of detail, so I enjoyed it. But I'm like, can he breathe? Are you okay?
Yeah.
No,
Right.
you're just really good at your job. I'm sure you've had
Mm,
to obviously kind of recite and sell obviously why should you choose Alchemy? So no, it was
yeah.
great. I appreciate all of the info, all the education.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so, perfect segue. Talking about education, I know
Yeah.
you also mentioned something along the lines of it earlier while we were talking, and it looks like Alchemy does have its own university online, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Alchemy University.
Mm-hmm. And the structure of the topics, they encompass a lot, right? It's very extensive. Where did the idea of providing a Web3 degree originate from, and what was the inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to take a step back, like Alchemy's like North Star metric is to bring 1 billion users into Web3 and using blockchain. So we really see ourselves as the starting point for developers looking to build applications on the blockchain. But to do so, there's so many different chains, so many different languages to choose from. Typically, developers specialize in certain languages and certain chains. So we had a number of educational materials out, like Web3 University and Road to Web3. It's kind of a number of online initiatives, but we really wanted to bring in, an enterprise level team that could help us do this and help us do this faster. We looked at kind of a number of education platforms out in the market. There was this team called ChainShot. They actually started out at ETH Denver a few years ago, which is one of the major Web3 conferences in the US. And super impressive team, right? They were like completely bootstrapped. There was only 4 employees. And they were already running coding boot camps for a lot of Web3 developers. So we kind of saw it as a natural fit to fold them into Alchemy University. Again, I think the program themselves were really, really impressive. They basically ran 10-week coding boot camps, and they had like a 50% job placement rate within 6 months of a developer, quote unquote, graduating from the boot camp, which is like, rivaled some of the best like online learning schools across any industry. So that's what kind of formalized into Alchemy University. We released that official, like newly branded program last summer. I think we saw almost 50,000 developers sign up for it. And again, we kind of saw it as a public utility, so we wanted to offer it for free. So basically, yeah, developers, anyone can sign up. They can kind of get a crash course from the basics of blockchain to writing in Rust and Solidity and learning actually how to build development platforms. And then lastly, we're actually kind of like where we're going with AU is we're partnering with a lot of major dApps and protocols to bring more like DApp protocol specific courses to AU. Because right now it's a little bit more generalist. And we want to equip developers with, how do you work with Uniswap's code? Or like, how do you build out a DEX? Right? So it's kind of like combining like classic textbook experience with real world experience. But given that many dApps and protocols kind of rely on forks or like GitHub repos from other dApps, it's important to kind of equip devs with the right tools so they feel confident building on the chain of their choice.
Ooh, yeah, I think this type of education needs to obviously become more accessible. And I think if you can get more people from all over the world, not just the US or just Europe or, just Singapore or something like that, we need to really make this up and coming, emerging, really cool, dope, awesome, incredible technology be more available
Yeah,
to everybody. Because there's a lot of smart people out there, it's just they need the
exactly.
opportunity, they need the access. So I really appreciate that you guys are also
Absolutely.
providing this type of service. It means a lot. And moving along in terms of the role of real world assets evolving in the DeFi
Mm.
space, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is like a super, super interesting topic. I know this is where BSOS is primarily focused. So real world assets, when I was doing some research, I saw it's already a pretty enormous sector, right? I think it's like a $300 billion plus sector. Um, what's really interesting, like for a lot of like traditional investors that invest in things like not just real estate, but like bonds, things like wine, things like gold, those are typically like pretty illiquid assets. So like bringing RWAs on chain basically kind of like unlocks the lending potential of this collateral, right? And like if you look at the real estate market, I think it's in the hundreds of trillions today. So beyond just like doing your typical like REIT type instruments, how do we bring this to blockchain? And some of the benefits of blockchain for this type of sector are things like, instant settlement, access to like a diverse group of investors and so on. So I think it's like a super interesting topic in terms of like how it relates to DeFi. So DeFi is like really interesting, right? If you look at like, I think one metric a lot of folks measure the success of DeFi on is TVL. If you look at the TVL of DeFi just like a year and a half ago during the peak of the bull market, it was at 180 billion. Right now, the TVL of DeFi is less than 50 billion. So all that really means is like, call it investors are kind of fleeting towards more TradFi instruments. Say investors are looking for like more stable, reliable yields. Obviously, some DeFi projects had really poor tokenomics. There's also been the kind of systemic events like the fall of like Luna, the fall of FTX. So essentially, like developers or investors, sorry, are looking for more reliable and predictable yields. And I think there's like a lot of interesting platforms that are doing this today. I mentioned like BSOS is helping to securitize, real world assets and make them available to individual investors on the blockchain. We work with a lot of other platforms as well. Maple and Goldfinch are two of them. And, I kind of like, I come from a finance background. So like, these are like really interesting projects where you have like people on chain that are doing the due diligence, that are vetting projects, that are creating like basically liquid pools for people to pick and choose their risk profile, their reward profile, and figure out like what investment works best for them. But it really, I think it helps to disintermediate a lot of the TradFi model, because you don't have to go to a bank for your typical collateralized loan. You can use your real world collateral as an asset, and then make that available for individual investors from any kind of diverse set to invest in using the power of the blockchain. So I think it's like a super cool sector. I think it's only going to get bigger as more and more folks discover like DeFi and how RWAs work. But it's definitely a sector worth keeping your eye on.
For sure. I think like we're on the precipice, and it's cool to be a part of this industry, even though it's still not like a newborn, it's maybe a toddler right now, but it's cool to still kind of be a part of the foundation, the building blocks, and doing stuff like this, connecting with other like-minded individuals, professionals in the industry. We have time for one more question, Andrew, and it's not even
Sure.
like super question. It's more like I want to know, are there any recent updates or projects that Alchemy or your team is working on right now? And is there anything that you're able to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Number of interesting developments, so I'll keep it short. First off, we just released our Q1 Web3 developer report. We actually started doing this, basically keeping a pulse on the market, and we look at things like SDK installs, smart contract deployments. We basically want to like give the market a preview into what's happening in the world of Web3. Really interesting insights from there. I encourage you all to check it out. Like there's things like, which sectors are leading VC investment that happens to be DeFi, but like there's sectors like roll-ups as a service that are starting to pop up a lot. We tracked, enrollments into things like Alchemy University. We saw like which wallets are performing best based on like who's adopting their SDK. So highly encourage folks to check that out. It's really insightful into what's going on in that world. We also this quarter or last quarter released this project called Create Web3 DApp. It's basically a beginner-friendly dev tool for creating a fully functioning DApp in less than 4 minutes. Kind of like one of those fun projects, and it basically lowers the barrier to entry to creating your own DApp. We had about 5,000 people download that initial code base to get going there. We also released our DApp store. So we basically wanted to like index Web3 and say like what are the coolest projects within each vertical, within each chain that developers should be looking for. And the reason why I did this is, if you look at like wallets, exchanges, marketplace, I keep coming back to those examples, there's so many to choose from. So we want to give people like basically like a single source of truth or a library to look up their best projects and see what works for them. What else did we do? We did Web3 awards, or the Web3 like 30 under 30 awards. We basically like had thousands of developers and folks vote on their favorite projects. Not surprisingly, projects like 1inch, Aave, OpenSea, Phantom surfaced and bubbled up to the top. There's some like really cool ones in there like Collabland and Mirror. So, encourage folks to check that out. Like, what folks are using, not just based on like installs, but what people really like using. And then kind of a last initiative, I'm just kind of like rattling off from memory, is the Web3 Talent Collective. So kind of like a joint job board that we partnered with on a few different companies with. I know there's kind of like a lot of like, considerations in the job market, and there's some like layoffs in Web2 companies. So we wanted to help folks to find the right projects that work for them in the future. And we're kind of trying to be, again, just another source of information for people looking for new employment opportunities. So a lot of different initiatives. Happy to give more detail, but encourage folks to check those all out.
Yes. And speaking of folks checking stuff out, where can the audience find you guys? Feel free to plug your socials.
Yeah, personally, Romit Murchie across socials. Otherwise, Alchemy across Twitter, LinkedIn, Discord, Telegram, kind of a number of different channels there. But yeah, everything's available on our website, www.alchemy.com. And please feel free to reach out, and happy to discuss anything that we chatted about today.
Amazing. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Romit and the Alchemy team. That was a lot of information, and I hope everyone is taking notes because you were dropping the gems, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it, Romit. Cool. Well, enjoy the weekend, you guys. It was really fun to talk to you today.
Sweet. Yeah.
With this, we come to the end of the episode. To our audience, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what we are discussing about the RWA and DeFi world, please don't forget to subscribe to Link to the Chain and share it with others. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow our Instagram and Twitter at Link to the Chain. Looking forward to sharing with you guys the next episode. Stay tuned.